Welcome back to Genetics in the Paddock. I'm your host, Emily Johnston, and I'll be taking you along on my journey to learn about all things genetics in extensive livestock. Livestock genetics has always been a topic that's interested me, and now working in the genetic space, it's fascinated me even more with just how powerful of a tool it can be. And I'm surrounded by so many knowledgeable people who are so willing to share their insight, so I thought, why not capture these conversations on a podcast that we can all learn from? In this episode, I spoke with Renee Rippon, a technical officer from the Southern Multi-Breed Project run by New South Wales DPI. She takes us on her journey with career highlights, including how she came to find her passion in the industry, and she talks about the importance of the Southern Multi-Breed Project for recording new female fertility traits. So you want to stick around for this one. And with that, let's get into it. Today I'm joined by Renee Rippon, who's one of my colleagues at New South Wales DPI, and I'm very excited to have her on for this episode. So thank you so much, Renee, for taking some time out of your very busy week to sit down and have a chat with me.
Thanks for having me, Emily.
Thank you. So I guess let's just jump straight into it. I think that's the best way to go about things. So Renee, can you just tell me just a little bit about yourself, like what kind of role you're in at the moment and how you're integrated into DPI, and just a little bit about you.
So my official role for my position at DPI is Technical and Operations Officer for the Southern Multi-Breed Project. What does that mean? Well, every day is pretty well different, but I kind of sit between the principal scientists for the project and the farm staff where the cattle are living, and make the data collection and all the operations for the Southern Multi-Breed Project happen for whatever we need to do.
That's massive. And I know we've spoken to Brad a little bit about the Southern Multi-Breed Project, and from what he said, it's a project that sounds like it would take a lot of your time, and being a statewide role and super busy, I can imagine all the time it's just on the go for you, and it's just always so busy and so different.
Yeah, every day is different, which is something I love about my role, and it is challenging, but it's also really rewarding. So it's good.
And how long have you been in the role for?
I was in the casual position when project started, but in a full-time role for 2.5 years now. Yeah. Okay.
So how did you get here? Because I'm assuming this probably wasn't your first job or just something you landed into. I think, being in a project that sounds this big and amazing would take some effort to get into. So where did it all start for you? How did you get here?
Wow, we'll go back a fair way. So I'm born and bred in Lismore in the north of New South Wales. Grew up in town, actually. Didn't grow up on a property, but spent most weekends and every school holidays on my grandfather's beef cattle operation down near Grafton. And I guess that's where my love of beef cattle farming came from. So did all the ag courses while I was at high school. Originally thought I wanted to be a vet, but after doing a bit of work experience in the vet world, realised that I probably wasn't chasing cats and dogs and their owners. I didn't really want to work with them every day. It was really the beef cattle side of things that interest me. So I did a bit of a backflip on becoming a vet and decided I wanted to more focus on beef cattle. So I studied agricultural science, mainly animal science, at the University of Queensland in Brisbane when I left high school. From there I graduated and took the first or best job I could as a uni graduate. So headed into the world of nutrition at a stock feed company out on the Darling Downs. I did that for 18 months and it was good. It was a great experience as a uni graduate, but realised pretty quickly that nutrition, and especially intensive nutrition like feedlotting and piggeries and that sort of thing, wasn't really where my passion lay. And also I wanted to get into research, not just formulating rations in a stock feed company. So did that for 18 months, but then decided to head north with my now husband. And I also realised, I think, once I'd left uni that I had all the scientific knowledge from doing a uni degree, and I had a bit of practical from spending a bit of time on a beef cattle farm, but I really needed a lot more practical hands-on experience if I wanted to, I guess, stay in the research industry, but also go far in the research industry. So that took us to a job on the Barkly Tablelands. I worked in the stock camp amongst doing a wealth of other things on the station, cooking, teaching kids, doing all the things like that. And I don't regret that for one second, sort of putting myself back in a very junior position and just getting my hands dirty and learning the tools of the trade for running or, working on huge cattle properties. So that was really good experience. From there, we headed up towards Katherine in the Northern Territory. My husband was managing a little place out of Katherine, and I actually got my foot in the door with the Northern Territory Department of Primary Industries then as a technical officer, which was really exciting because I think when I started uni, that was the end goal. And to finally get myself into that job sort of after going through uni and then spending 2.5 years not doing that, once I got my foot in the door there, it was really exciting. NT DPI was fantastic in that our Katherine team, we were only a very small team, but we covered a huge amount of projects in all different aspects of agriculture. So each project was managed by someone, but we only had 2 technical officers. So during the dry season, we'd all help each other collect all the data for all the projects. So one week you might have been collecting data for a fire and pasture project. The next week you were collecting cattle data for a fertility project and everything in between those 2 things. So it was a really good job in that you saw a lot of different research, collected a lot of different data.
I feel like that would have been really helpful for help guiding you and finding what your niche was as well, and just some areas that you like better than others.
Yeah, that's right. And so you got a taste of everything. You worked out whether you liked cutting pasture quadrats or whether you wanted to, be in the cattle space and be collecting weights and fertility data and that sort of thing. So it was really good. And you worked with a lot of different scientists in more senior roles. So, they were mentoring you the whole time in all different aspects of projects and project management. So it was really good. So really busy dry seasons up there collecting all your data, and then really busy wet seasons in the office, collating and processing all the data, writing reports, doing all that sort of stuff. So I spent 2 years in a technical officer role at NTDPI, and then I was lucky enough that our production officer role came up and I stepped up into that, which sort of meant instead of just helping those people collect the data, I actually got to run the projects myself. And even more luckily, I got projects that I was actually really passionate about. So one of my projects was the selected Brahman herd, which is a herd that the Northern Territory DPI have had for, it would have to be towards 30 years now.
Wow.
It was, nearly 20 years when I had it. And they've selected really, really heavily for the fertility traits in the Brahman up there, it was really interesting, and it was probably something that I was really interested in. So managing that project was really fantastic, and I was glad that I got to inherit that project and run it for so long. Mm-hmm. So I did that, had a couple of kids during that time, and then my husband, we decided he needed to be pushed a little bit harder in his career aspirations, I guess. So he applied and got the assistant manager's role at Victoria River Downs Station, which is sort of out southwest of Katherine, and we moved out there. That was in 2011, so we had a fair bit more responsibility in that position. I kept working for the Department of Primary Industries because luckily my project was actually based on the property next door on Kidman Springs, so it meant that I could keep working for the DPI and live at VRD and help my husband in the management assistant manager position. But then there was a few other things that happened, and the managers there had to leave at very short notice, and we sort of got thrown from assistant managers into managers overnight. And in that happening, it sort of meant that I needed to help more on the station. So I'm not a person that can do things in halves, and I didn't want to not do either of those jobs and be a mum to the best of my ability. So it was a really hard decision. But I resigned from the DPI and handed my projects over to other very capable people, which is why one of them is still running now. And we became the managers of VRD, which was, really challenging but really rewarding at the same time. Luckily, 12 months later, the original station managers that were there could return to VRD, but at the same time, we'd sort of stepped up into a manager's role, and so we moved next door to Pigeonhole Station and took on the manager's role over there. So that was really good. We were running roughly 20,000 head of cattle. Once the kids got a little bit older, I could get back, out in the cattle yards a bit more. And we did some management things that were probably based on my understanding of genetics and science and research and that sort of stuff, which I think benefited our management style. Yeah, so that was good.
It sounds like you guys had a lot of great experiences up there, a whole variety, and even just having that sort of responsibility as a manager would have been so eye-opening and so good for growth. And as you just said, like using some of the science in your previous role and then being able to implement it on the farm and just see how it works between different properties and different productions as well. That would have been so interesting.
It was, Em. It was, I think you're living and working with, we had up to 20 staff under us, all living and working together 24/7. It takes a lot to manage people and run a station like that, as my husband says, because it's really easy to run cattle and waters and nutrition for cattle. It's really hard to have 20 people that have come from all corners of Australia and sometimes overseas. We employed backpackers too. We used to have Indonesian students that came over on like work experience. To have all those people with different personalities, different walks of life come and live and work 24/7 together and have your kids in amongst that as well. It's definitely a different world, but really, really rewarding. And it teaches you so many things that you don't even, until those, and I think I call on them every day, even in my role now, those experiences make or help you in future roles. We're 5 hours from town, so you can't just duck into town to grab something if something breaks. You learn to improvise, you learn to plan, and all of those skills that you don't actually know that you're learning them or getting better at them until you get into another role and you kind of go, oh, well, I was doing that, I just didn't really realise I was doing that. Yeah, it really helps with what you do in the future.
That's amazing. It just sounds like it was great for a whole heap of experience in not just, as you said, the farm side of things or the production side of things, but just a whole lifestyle learning curve. Like, that sounds incredible. So you guys were working up in the Territory. So how did you get back to New South Wales? What's the story there?
So I think we always knew we were going to come home. We just didn't really know when. And we kind of got to the top, I guess you could say, as managers, and we did it for a fair while. But I guess in the back of our heads, we always wanted to do it for ourselves. We didn't want to manage cattle stations for corporations or companies for the rest of our lives. And a few other things came into play. So we sort of made the call, kids got to a certain age, that we were going to head back down south, and we've got 400 acres just west of Casino we were always coming home to. So we decided to make the call and move down south or down home, put the kids in, I'm going to say proper school. No disrespect to School of the Year, it was fantastic, but I was not a school teacher and definitely not for my own kids. Yeah, it works brilliant for some families, but for me and my kids, I could not teach my own kids. So got them into the proper or school system, so I didn't have to teach them, and bought our own property so that we could do it for ourselves. It's a lot different running 1 million acres and 20,000 head to running 400 acres and 200 head, but when they're your own, it's a lot more rewarding. So left our jobs up there, left our friends that had become more like family because we'd been up there for nearly 15 years, which wasn't an easy thing to do, but the end game was where we were focused. And we haven't looked back since we left. So left some perfectly good jobs on a bit of a whim, moved down here without really having anything set in concrete. And I saw the role for the agriculture teacher at TAFE, New South Wales, advertised. Decided to apply for it. I thought, well, I didn't make a very good teacher for my kids, but I will have a crack at being an agriculture teacher. So I applied for that, and I actually got the role on the proviso that I did my Cert 4 in training and assessment before the TAFE year started, which gave me 3 months to do a 12-month TA certificate.
Wow. Very condensed.
Very condensed. So smashed that out because I needed to have it by the start of February when the TAFE year started, and started teaching agriculture, Cert 2, 3 and 4 agriculture at TAFE, which was a huge change. Like I never ever saw myself as being a teacher, but I found it really rewarding. And I think the thing with it was the kids that came into my classroom at TAFE had chosen to be there. You know, it's a bit different to teaching high school, which I take my hat off to high school teachers. But those kids had they might have fallen out of the high school system because they didn't want to be there to study English or science or any of those things, but they'd chosen to come into my classroom and learn agriculture. So yeah, the fact that they wanted to be there, and I sort of took the teaching style. Again, you didn't realise you were developing the skills, but when I sat down and thought about it, I was teaching our staff on the station up in the Territory every day of the week. You know, they'd turn up and all the employees had different levels of experience on farm, from a kid that had grown up on a decent sized property through to a kid that had grown up in Sydney and decided they wanted to do a gap year between finishing at King's College in Sydney and going to uni to become a solicitor. They were going to do a gap year. They'd never ever picked up a set of fencing pliers or ridden a motorbike or anything like that. So
wow.
Every day you were teaching these kids skills of, you know, how to muster cattle, how to handle cattle in the yards, how to vaccinate. But you didn't actually realise you were doing it because you just did it. So once I got in the classroom at TAFE, I realised I could actually do it. I'd been doing it not formally for years and years. So I guess that sort of teaching came quite easily to me, and I did really, really enjoy it. So I did that for 4 years, and it was really rewarding. And even now, you'll catch up with kids that you had taught in a Cert 2 or a Cert 3, and they're now still in the industry doing great things. You know, they might be working for a rural agent, or they might be working for, you know, as an auctioneer, or doing great things in the industry. And it is really rewarding when they still, you know, come up to you and talk to you and, oh, remember when this happened in class, miss? Yeah.
That is so rewarding. I can only imagine just how much of an impact you had on their schooling life, and just how, you know, they've kickstarted their career, and they probably credit a lot of that to you and your teaching style as well.
Yeah.
Which must just feel so heartwarming just to see them doing well. And it's just, yeah, that sounds awesome, Renee.
Yeah, no, it was really rewarding. So yeah, I did it for 4 years. COVID made teaching really hard when you had to take courses that were heavily practical courses to keep those kids engaged that don't want to sit in front of computer screens. And then COVID hit and you had to try and teach agriculture through a computer screen. It became really hard. And I guess at the same time, the Southern Multibreed project was ramping up, and I was offered a lot more work back in research with Southern Multibreed. So I guess that was the end of my TAFE teaching career. But I don't regret it one little bit. And like you say, it's really, really rewarding when you see those kids that you taught out in the agriculture sector doing really good things. Yeah. Absolutely.
So that brings us to Southern Multibreed, which is something I'd love to have a bit more of a chat to you about today. So I guess you've been working with SMB for a little while now, and having had all of your experience working in the ag sector as well, what do you find so rewarding about SMB? What makes you want to come into work every day? What drives you within this project specifically?
So I think it was back in 2019 maybe, I saw an article in The Land about this project called Southern Multibreed that the New South Wales DPI was looking at, you know, kicking off, and I read it and I went, oh, that sounds really interesting. I need to get my foot in the door on that project. And I had sort of been looking for ways into New South Wales DPI because I knew research was always my area of interest. So I sort of read the article and went, I really, really need to get my foot in the door on that project. So emailed a few people and finally got my foot in the door with New South Wales DPI on the Southern Multibreed project. It was only in a casual position at the start. When the project was sort of gaining momentum, I think just all the principles of what the project involves really interested me, especially genetic component. So got my foot in the door, started with some casual work, and then as the momentum of the project built, started doing a bit more and then got into a full-time role. I think that was at the end of 2020, I think. So yeah, I guess my position as technical officer has evolved as the project's evolved with what my actual role incorporates or needs me to do. But every day is pretty well different. I mean, we have our same project data that we collect each year, but then as the project progresses, there's different data that we collect as the project runs through. So it's really rewarding. At times it's really challenging, but I like a challenge. So yeah, that's really good.
That's great. And I guess I've worked with you a little bit throughout the project and spoken to you like on a few different occasions. So I'm lucky to know you on a little bit more of a personal level than this podcast. And I guess speaking to you a bit about your work that you did in the Northern Territory as well, it's clear that the fertility aspect of the project is something that you're quite passionate about and something that's very close to your heart. So is there like, what's the backstory behind that? Where did the fertility component come in that's so close to you and something that you enjoy so much?
Yeah, no, you're right, Emily. Fertility and our precious Brahmins are very close to my heart, probably because I did work in the north so much. And it is such an issue up there to have good fertility rates. And close to my heart because I do have Brahmins myself. So all of SMB is important, but I guess I've really put myself in the fertility and reproductive space because I do see it being something that is really important, especially to producers in our area that are, running a lot of Brahmin cross cattle. And, if you're in a breeding operation, numbers, and that comes from higher fertility rates, conception rates, calving rates, weaning rates, that's where your bread and butter is. That's where you make money. So I guess that's why that is important to me. And I hadn't really done much with it. I'd done a lot of preg testing in my previous roles, but the Southern Multibreed Project records ovarian scanning data, which is some new sort of traits that we're looking at that could become EBVs, but a lot better information in terms of heifer fertility and rebreed cycling after heifers calve. So I got the opportunity working in this position to get trained, and I was really lucky to have one of the pioneers of ovarian scanning, John Wilkins, teach me how to ovarian scan, and I've sort of learnt that skill and I'm using it in the Southern Multibreed Project. So amongst all the other things I do as technical officer and operations officer, I've learnt the skill of ovarian scanning, which I think is really exciting technology that we can use. And by doing this research in DPI, it's a hard to measure trait and it's very labour intensive. But if we can gather that information in this project, then other studs and commercial cattle producers can use the information that we're collecting. Once we've collected enough data and can really look at that data, hopefully they can use it on their day-to-day operations. So that is close to my heart because I think I like seeing research, and I've always tried to put myself in research that will actually give the producers and the people that are paying MLA fees actually get some benefit out of the research that MLA and other companies fund. Yeah, so research that has on-ground benefits for those people has always been a priority for me. And I do see this research as having an impact on all of those people, whether they're big stud seed stock producers right through to the commercial producers. Even the hobby farmers can gain something from the research that Southern Multibreed is doing. So that's why it's something I want to be involved in.
Absolutely. And it sounds like it would be so much more rewarding when you understand what the end benefits would be of putting in all the hard work that you guys do, especially you, Renee. As you said, the traits that you're measuring are so labour intensive, and I know how much you travel during the busy period, so it must just make it so worth it to know at the end that it's something that you could use on your property and we could use on that for our research herds and just everyone. Like, it's so applicable to all industries.
Yeah, that's right, Em. And I don't know, you pinch yourself some days, you know. I think if you can do a day's work that's actually work and not even think of it as work, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And I do that on a regular basis. Not always, but on a regular basis, I sort of pinch myself and go, oh, wow, that was an awesome day in the yards, like of scanning or whatever it was. You're seeing some pretty amazing things and you pinch yourself and go, I was actually at work today. I wasn't doing that for fun. I was actually at work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, pretty lucky to be in this position.
Makes getting out of bed a lot easier, I'm sure.
Definitely.
You get to see some pretty places and meet some cool people on the way.
That's right.
So I guess I'm interested in a bit of a broader question to ask you. And I think this question kind of circles back to what you were saying is before, when you first started your career, is, you know, gaining those skills and trying to make a footprint in the industry that you can carve out as your own to get your career started. So what advice would you have for somebody wanting to get into ag? What advice would you have for them as to, say, someone's just graduated with a degree? Could be they've got experience or they don't. What sort of tips or advice would you give looking back on where you've come from now, to where you are now, sorry? What advice would you give to those people?
So I guess I graduated, oh my goodness, this makes me sound old, 20-something years ago. Back then, especially in central Queensland, I remember going to my first field day and I think there was 30, probably 40 plus year old gentlemen at the field day. And then there was me. I was a fresh-faced graduate, the only female there apart from the ladies on the CWA serving the scones for morning tea. And it was really overwhelming. I was kind of like fresh-faced and full of great ideas that I'd learned at uni, but impossible to gain the respect of our lovely gentlemen who didn't want a female anywhere near their farms or field days. So I guess that was a little bit of a wake-up call. I think the industry has changed a lot now. You know, females are a dime a dozen. We at least match the number of males in our field now, if not more females. Back then it dawned on me pretty quick that I needed to know my stuff and I needed to not only have the skills science-wise and academia-wise, but I also needed to have practical skills to be able to mix it and show them that girls could do what the old-fashioned fellas could do. So I think for me that was a real turning point in that I needed to get my hands dirty and learn those skills so I could back the science that I'd learnt at uni to be able to gain respect and you know, carve a pathway or carve that career that I wanted in agriculture. So I think probably that would be my advice. You know, even though we're all, you know, there's as many males as females in our industry now, for everybody, you know, make sure you've got the skills and you can back yourself so you can be confident in what you're doing and what you're saying and get the respect of people, because once you've got that respect, you can go anywhere, you can do anything. Yeah.
I think that's some great advice and a really nice way to wrap up today's podcast. Thank you so much, Renee, for sitting down with me today. I've really enjoyed hearing about your story and how you've gone with everything, especially in the Southern Multi-Breed project, which is so big for our department as well. It's great to hear, you know, how much work you're putting into that and how close it is to your heart. And I'm sure all of our teams that you work with can agree that you have a great impact on the project and, you know, it's going to be benefited from years to come.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Genetics in the Paddock with Emily, a podcast produced by the extensive livestock genetics team within New South Wales DPI. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of genetics and its impact on livestock production. If you found this episode informative and engaging, please consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a review. Your feedback is essential in helping me to continue to bring you valuable content on livestock genetics. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics or guests, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on social media or through email. We love hearing from our listeners and are always eager to explore the subjects that matter most to you.